Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was 28 when I finally had enough. My husband had been cheating on me for years, and I'd tried to make it work for our son's sake. The verbal abuse I could handle, but the day he shoved me against the kitchen counter in front of our 5-year-old, I knew I was done. I filed for divorce the next morning. The divorce was messy. He fought me on everything: custody, support, even who got the old couch. In the end, I got primary custody of our son, a tiny apartment, and barely enough money to scrape by. He got his freedom and apparently used it to cycle through girlfriends like they were seasonal wardrobes. About a year after our divorce became final, one of his girlfriends started sticking around longer than usual. Karen was her name, though she insisted everyone call her by her full name like she was some kind of royalty. She was recently divorced from a wealthy businessman and made sure everyone knew it. The alimony payments kept her living in a nice house with a housekeeper and all the luxuries I could only dream of. Karen had a son the same age as mine. Where my boy was curious and kind, her son was demanding and spoiled. Karen would drop little comments whenever we had to interact during custody exchanges. She'd make remarks about my small apartment, calling it quaint in a way that was clearly meant to be insulting. She'd look at my son's hand-me-down clothes and sigh dramatically, making comments about how sad it was when children had to go without proper things. I suspected she'd been one of my ex-husband's affair partners. The timeline was too convenient, and she had this smirk whenever she talked to me, like she knew something I didn't. Despite everything, when my ex and Karen asked if I could babysit her son occasionally, I said yes. It wasn't the kid's fault his mother was awful, and my son would be seeing him during his dad's custody time anyway. Why make the children suffer because the adults were terrible? Her son wasn't mean-spirited, just incredibly entitled. He expected the world to revolve around him because that's how he'd been raised. One afternoon stands out in my memory like it happened yesterday. I was making lunch when he wandered into the kitchen. He announced that he wanted toast and jam. When I told him I could make that, he asked if I had marmalade. I confirmed that I did. Then he wanted to know if I had whole wheat or whole grain bread. I told him I had whole wheat bread. He then told me that I should make him toast with marmalade on whole wheat bread and cut the crusts off. He added that he hoped it was good marmalade, like he was some kind of food critic. He said it all like he was ordering from a restaurant. No, please, no thank you. Just pure expectation that I would serve him exactly how he wanted. I made the toast, cut off the crusts, and watched him examine it like a food critic before taking a bite. After tasting it, he said that the marmalade was okay. He guessed. Another time he told me I was poor because I cleaned my own house, instead of having a maid like his mother. I pointed out that technically he was poorer than me since he had no money of his own. All the luxury in his life came from his father's alimony payments to his mother. He argued that it was different because his mom had money, so he had money. When I explained that it wasn't his money and he didn't earn it, he dismissed this by saying he didn't need to earn it because he was going to inherit everything someday. That was the kind of kid he was, completely disconnected from reality. Meanwhile, everyone around me seemed convinced I was going to fail as a mother. I was small, broke, and struggling. My ex-husband kept causing problems, and I had to get restraining orders when his behavior escalated. People whispered that a single mom with no support couldn't possibly raise a child properly. But they didn't see what happened behind closed doors. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, but I was home every evening to help with homework. I made breakfast, lunch, and dinner from scratch every day. We ate together every night, and I was always available when my son needed me. When he started struggling with math, I took on extra work to hire a tutor. The tutor had a doctorate in mathematics. After working with my son for a few weeks, he pulled me aside and told me he thought my son might be a genius. He said he wasn't exaggerating. When I asked if he was sure because my son had been having trouble with his schoolwork, the tutor explained that my son wasn't having trouble understanding. He was bored because the work was too easy for him. My son struggled through elementary and high school, but not because he couldn't do the work. He was just incredibly bored and acted out because of it. I spent countless hours in the principal's office trying to advocate for him while people shook their heads and assumed he was headed nowhere. Fast forward about 15 years. My son was grown, my ex-husband and Karen had broken up years ago, and I was finally in a good place in my life. I was at a local charity event when I spotted Karen across the room. She looked older, more worn down than I remembered. She approached me with that same condescending smile she'd always worn. She acted surprised to see me and commented that I looked exactly the same. Then she made a snide remark about how I was probably still struggling to make ends meet. I told her that actually I was doing quite well and thanked her for asking. She said that was nice to hear, then started talking about how she'd been thinking about our boys recently. She explained that her son John had been having a hard time with drugs and had been in and out of rehab. She said she kept hoping he'd turn his life around, but with no real life skills, it was difficult. Then she paused and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She suggested that my son probably ended up the same way, calling him poor thing and saying he was never very bright. She reminded me that he was terrible in school. She reached out and put her hand on my arm with fake sympathy, saying it must be so hard when children don't live up to expectations. I stepped back and smiled at her. I told her that actually my son had 3 degrees in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. I explained that he did his undergraduate work with a double major in physics and astronomy, graduating with a 4.3 grade point average in both subjects. Karen's face started to change when I continued. I mentioned that he was planning to be an astrophysicist, but then changed his mind and got his advanced degree in nanophysics instead. I told her he was currently working in a prestigious laboratory engineering semiconductors for rocket technology, which technically made him a rocket scientist. Karen's mouth fell open slightly when I kept going. I described his amazing girlfriend, who just made partner at her law firm, how they both made 6-figure salaries, and how he just bought a house. I finished by saying I was incredibly blessed that he turned out so well. I patted her shoulder gently and told her it was nice seeing her again. I said I was sorry to hear about her son and that I hoped he could get his life on track. I added that he was a sweet kid, even though that wasn't entirely true. Karen just stood there, speechless, when I walked away. All those years of her looking down on me, all those comments about my son not being bright enough, all that superiority, it all crumbled in that moment. I didn't have to lie or exaggerate. My son really had become everything I said he was. My role in my client services job is straightforward. I'm the middleman between our clients and our internal teams. When a client needs something, they contact me and I make sure the right people on our side know about it. When our teams have updates or questions, I relay that back to the clients. Simple stuff, really. My manager has never been super hands-on. She hired me, trained me for like 2 weeks, and then left me to handle everything on my own, which was fine by me, honestly. I prefer working independently, and our clients seemed happy with how I handled things. I kept good records, responded quickly to emails, and made sure nothing fell through the cracks. But last month, something changed. My manager came to my desk on a Tuesday morning looking serious. She told me she needed me to start copying her on all my client emails from now on. When I asked if she meant all of them, even the routine stuff, she said yes, everything. She explained that she wanted full transparency on what was happening with our clients and that she should be in the loop on all communications. I asked if there was any particular reason why, and she just said she wanted to make sure we were maintaining proper oversight. She said I should understand why this was important. I didn't really understand, but whatever. She's the boss. If she wanted to get hundreds of emails about shipping delays and invoice questions, that was her choice. I figured maybe someone higher up was asking her to be more involved. Or maybe she was just trying to look more engaged for her own performance review. So I started copying her on literally everything. And I mean everything. When clients asked about their order status, she got copied. When they complained about delivery times, she got copied. When they sent thank you notes, she got copied. When they asked technical questions that I had to forward to our engineering team, she got copied on those too. For the first week, she didn't say anything. I figured she was just reading through everything to get a feel for what was going on. But then things got interesting. See, the thing about my manager is that while she wanted transparency on my work, she wasn't exactly transparent about her own responsibilities. She was supposed to handle the bigger client accounts personally, attend certain meetings, and send over important files when clients requested them. But she had a habit of forgetting things or just being too busy with other stuff. 2 weeks into the copying situation, I got an email from one of our biggest clients. They were asking where my manager had been the day before, since they had a scheduled call at 2 p.m. and she never showed up. They mentioned this was the third time this had happened. I had to respond professionally, but honestly, I was embarrassed. This client pays us a lot of money, and my manager just ghosted them. I sent back a sincere apology and said I would check with her schedule and get back to them with a new meeting time. Of course, I copied my manager on this email like she requested. I also copied her when I had to send a follow-up explaining that there was a scheduling conflict and proposing new meeting times. A few days later, another client emailed about some files they needed. They said they'd been waiting 2 weeks for the technical specifications that had been promised, and their project was delayed because they couldn't move forward without this information. Again, I had to play damage control. I told them I was following up internally on their request and would make sure they received the files by end of business that day. I copied my manager and then had to chase her down in person to actually get the files sent. She seemed annoyed that I was bothering her about it, but eventually got them over to the client. The real fun started when another client sent a pretty direct email about a pattern they were noticing. They asked if there was a reason why they kept having communication issues with our team. They listed missed meetings, delayed deliveries, and waiting on basic information that should have been provided weeks ago. They said they were starting to question whether the partnership was working. This was a big problem. This client represented about 30% of our department's revenue. I crafted a very careful response about how we were reviewing our processes and would ensure better communication going forward. I copied my manager naturally. That's when she started getting nervous about all these emails. A couple days later, she replied to a client complaint saying they should take this offline and discuss internally before responding further. The client wasn't having it. They shot back that this wouldn't be an issue if she'd shown up to their scheduled meetings. They said they'd been trying to discuss these problems with her for weeks. I almost felt bad for my manager when I read that response. Almost. She had asked for transparency after all. After that exchange, she went quiet on the email copying thing. She never officially told me to stop, but she stopped mentioning it. I kept copying her though because she never said to stop, and I'm nothing if not thorough about following instructions. The satisfying part came a few weeks later when our department head sent out an email about client satisfaction scores. Apparently, several clients had been complaining about lack of communication and missed commitments from management. The department head scheduled individual meetings with everyone to discuss how we could improve client relationships. I went into my meeting prepared. I brought printed copies of all the client emails from the past month, neatly organized by date and client. When the department head asked about the communication issues, I was able to show exactly what had been happening and how I'd been trying to manage the situation. The department head looked through everything and said it seemed like I'd been doing damage control on a lot of issues that shouldn't have been my responsibility. I just told them I try to keep the clients happy and make sure nothing falls through the cracks. They asked if I'd been copying my manager on all of this, and I confirmed that yes, she had requested full transparency on client communications about a month ago. The department head nodded and made some notes. A week later, my manager had to start attending a weekly check-in meeting about client management and accountability. She also got assigned a task management system where she has to log and track all her client commitments. She hasn't mentioned wanting to be copied on emails since then. In fact, she seems to prefer staying out of the day-to-day client communications entirely, which is fine by me. It means I can go back to handling things efficiently without having to document every little interaction. But just in case she ever decides she wants that transparency again, I've got some draft emails ready to go, including a detailed one about proper meeting etiquette and another about the importance of following through on commitments to clients, for transparency. I'm a single dad raising my 8-year-old son after his mom passed away 2 years ago from cancer. It's been tough adjusting to life without her, and I've been doing my best to make sure my boy has as normal a childhood as possible. We moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago for a fresh start, and the local park became our regular hangout spot. My son loves the swings more than anything else there. That Tuesday afternoon started like any other. I had picked him up from school, and we decided to hit the park before dinner. The weather was perfect, and there were quite a few families around. My son ran straight to the swing set like he always does, but all 4 swings were occupied. No problem, I thought. Kids his age are pretty good about sharing. We stood there waiting for about 10 minutes. I watched one by one, kids finished their turns and moved on to the slides or monkey bars. Finally, one swing opened up and my son practically bounced with excitement when he hopped on. He'd been so patient waiting his turn. That's when she showed up. This woman, probably in her late 30s, walked over with her kid in tow. Her son looked to be around the same age as mine, maybe a year younger. She had this look on her face like she owned the place. The woman rudely told my son that he needed to get off the swing right away. My son looked confused and looked at me. I walked closer to see what was going on. I asked her what the problem was. She said her son wanted to use that swing and claimed he had been waiting. I looked around. Her kid was literally just running around the playground equipment when we got there. There was no way he'd been waiting for anything. I explained that my son had just gotten on after waiting about 10 minutes and that I was sure he wouldn't be too much longer. My son told her he had just gotten on and that he had waited a really long time. She said she didn't care how long we had waited. She demanded that her son wanted this swing and that my son was going to give it to him. The entitlement in her voice was unbelievable. Other parents were starting to notice the commotion. I told her to look at the 3 other swings and explained that when one opened up, her son could use it. I said that's how playgrounds work. She snapped back that I shouldn't tell her how playgrounds work and insisted that her son wanted this specific swing. Her kid wasn't even paying attention to us anymore. He'd wandered off to climb on the jungle gym, but this woman was determined to make this a battle. My son said he wasn't getting off because he had waited his turn. Smart kid. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong. That's when things got scary. Without any warning, Karen walked behind my son and started pushing the swing. Not gentle pushes like you'd give a toddler, but hard, aggressive shoves that sent him flying way higher than he should go. I yelled at her to stop that right now. She said if he wouldn't get off, she would make him get off. She kept pushing harder and harder. My son was gripping the chains tight, his knuckles white. The swing was going so high I could see the chains starting to slack at the top of each arc. My son screamed for her to stop and told her she was pushing too hard. I shouted at the woman that she needed to stop this right now before someone got hurt, but she wouldn't listen. She gave one final violent push that sent my son soaring. I watched in horror when he lost his grip at the peak of the swing's arc and went flying through the air. He hit the ground hard about 6 feet away from the swing set. The sound of him hitting the packed dirt will haunt me forever. He wasn't moving. I ran to him fast. He was conscious but crying hard. His arms and legs were scraped up badly, with blood trickling from several cuts. His shirt was torn and dirty. Worst of all, he was holding his left wrist and saying it hurt really bad. Other parents had rushed over too. One woman was already on her phone calling for an ambulance. One parent said she had seen the whole thing and that the woman had pushed him way too hard on purpose. Another parent agreed that it was completely intentional and that she was trying to hurt him. Karen was standing there looking shocked, like she hadn't expected this to happen. Her son had come running over and was asking why the other kid was crying. Karen claimed it was an accident and that she was just trying to help him swing. I told her that helping wasn't what she was doing. She was trying to hurt him because he wouldn't give up the swing. She denied it and said I was overreacting. A third parent spoke up and told the woman that they had all seen what she did. The parent said she had deliberately pushed my kid dangerously hard. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked my son over and determined he had a sprained wrist, multiple scrapes, and possible bruising to his ribs. They wanted to take him to the hospital to get x-rays to make sure nothing was broken. While they were loading him into the ambulance, the police showed up. Multiple parents had called them when they saw what happened. The officer asked Karen if it was true that she had intentionally pushed this child off the swing, explaining that they had received several reports. Karen insisted it was an accident and that she was just trying to play with him. The officer said that multiple witnesses claimed she was pushing him aggressively after he refused to give up the swing to her child. Karen accused them all of lying and said I was trying to sue her or something. One of the parents told the officer that she had recorded the last part on her phone and that you could clearly see Karen pushing him violently. I didn't even know someone had been recording, but I was grateful. The officer watched the video and shook his head. The officer told Karen she was under arrest for assault on a minor. She protested that it was ridiculous and that she didn't assault anyone. The officer explained that she had intentionally put a child in danger and caused him to be injured, which was assault. When they put the handcuffs on her, she kept screaming about how unfair it was and how her son should have had the swing. Her own kid was crying now, confused about why his mom was being arrested. At the hospital, the x-rays showed my son's wrist was just sprained, not broken. The scrapes would heal in a week or two, but the doctor said he was lucky he didn't break any bones or hit his head. 2 days later, I found out Karen had been charged with assault and child endangerment. Several parents had given statements to the police about what they witnessed. The woman who recorded the video sent me a copy for our lawyer. I learned from another parent that Karen had been banned from the park by the city after this incident. She'd had complaints filed against her before for being aggressive with other people's kids, but nothing this serious. My son is doing better now. His wrist is almost healed and the scrapes are fading. He was nervous about going back to the playground at first, but we've been a few times since then, and he's getting his confidence back. She's due in court next month. I'll be there to make sure she doesn't get away with hurting my kid. I was born with a rare genetic disorder that affects how my bones formed, specifically in my legs. The doctors explained it to my parents as a 1 in a million condition where the bone structure around my knees didn't develop properly. What this means in practical terms is that my kneecaps can dislocate with very little pressure or movement. Growing up was rough. I spent more time in hospitals than most kids spend in school. From age 8 to 15, I had 7 major surgeries trying to reconstruct and stabilize my knee joints. The recovery periods were brutal. Months of physical therapy, learning to walk again each time, and dealing with constant pain. I had to do online school because I missed so much class time being in the hospital or recovering at home. The surgeries helped a lot. I can walk normally now, which is something doctors weren't sure would ever happen. But there are still major limitations. I can't run without risking a dislocation. I can't jump. Quick pivoting movements are dangerous. Sports are completely out of the question. I always joke that if my life depended on running, I might make it a block before something pops out of place. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago. I had just started an internship at this data analytics firm. It's a great opportunity and I was excited to finally be working in my field after graduating college. The company has this tradition where they throw a barbecue at the beginning of summer to welcome new interns and help everyone get to know each other outside the office. The barbecue was at my supervisor's house and about 25 people showed up. The food was great, everyone seemed friendly, and I was actually enjoying myself. My boss had set up a volleyball net in his backyard, and after we finished eating, people started organizing teams to play. One of my co-workers came over and asked if I wanted to join their team. I politely declined and explained that I have a disability that prevents me from playing sports. I kept it simple because honestly, explaining my condition gets complicated fast, and I've learned that most people don't really want the full medical breakdown unless they specifically ask. Here's where things got weird. There's another co-worker at the firm who uses a wheelchair. She was standing nearby and apparently overheard what I said. She wheeled over to me with this really hostile expression on her face. She told me there was no way I had a disability because she could see me walking around just fine and that I didn't have any observable impairments. I was completely caught off guard. Nobody had ever questioned whether I was actually disabled before. I tried to stay calm and explain that I was born with a genetic condition that affected how my leg bones formed and that I'd had multiple surgeries to correct it. She asked what kind of surgeries I needed and why I would even need surgery if I could walk fine. I told her that my knees dislocate very easily and that I had 7 surgeries over several years to try to stabilize the joints so I could walk without constantly popping my kneecaps out of place. She said that wasn't a real disability and that I was just making excuses because I didn't want to play volleyball. Other people were starting to notice the conversation. I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. I explained that I spent most of my childhood in hospitals and had to do online school because I missed so much class time recovering from surgeries. I told her I can walk now, but I can't run or jump or play sports. She said that if I could walk, I wasn't disabled and that I was just lazy and looking for attention. I said that I wasn't looking for attention and just couldn't safely participate in physical activities like volleyball. She got even more aggressive and said I was insulting actually disabled people by claiming I had a disability when I clearly didn't. She pointed to herself and said that she couldn't walk at all, and that was what real disability looked like. The whole backyard had gone quiet. Everyone was staring at us. I felt humiliated and angry. I told her I wasn't trying to minimize her disability or anyone else's and was just explaining why I couldn't play sports. She got louder and told me to stop calling it a disability because I was being offensive to people who were actually disabled. I could see my supervisor looking uncomfortable and starting to walk over. I said that I'd always considered my condition a disability because it significantly limits what I can do physically. She yelled that I was wrong and that just because I had some surgeries didn't make me disabled. She pointed out that I was walking around fine right then. I was done. I was embarrassed, angry, and frankly shocked that someone would gatekeep disability like this, especially at a work function. I told her I didn't need to justify my medical history to her or anyone else, and that I knew what I'd been through and knew my limitations. She said I was just trying to get special treatment and sympathy, and that it was disgusting. That was the last straw. I looked around at all my new co-workers staring at us, including my supervisor, who looked mortified. I decided I was done with the whole situation. I told everyone I was going to leave before this got any worse, and thanked them for the barbecue. I grabbed my things and headed for my car. When I was walking away, I heard Karen still ranting to anyone who would listen about how I was faking a disability for attention. Here's the satisfying part though. The next Monday at work, my supervisor called me into his office. I was worried I was going to get in trouble for the scene at the barbecue. Instead, he apologized for what happened and explained that several co-workers had approached him about Karen's behavior. Apparently, after I left, she continued making loud comments about fake disabled people and made several other guests uncomfortable. My supervisor told me that what happened was completely inappropriate and that it didn't reflect the values of the company. He said they'd had to have a serious conversation with my coworker about workplace harassment. Karen had been put on a formal warning for creating a hostile work environment. 3 other coworkers had complained about her aggressive behavior at the barbecue, saying it made them uncomfortable and that they felt bad for me. One person even said they were considering leaving early because of how nasty she was being. A few days later came the satisfying part. Karen had apparently been complaining to Human Resources about the warning, claiming she was being discriminated against for being disabled. However, when HR reviewed the situation with witnesses from the barbecue, they upheld the warning and told her that disability status doesn't give anyone the right to harass co-workers or police other people's medical conditions. She hasn't spoken to me directly, which is honestly fine by me. Several of my co-workers have made a point to be extra friendly and welcoming, which I appreciate. I still can't believe someone would gatekeep disability like that, especially at a work function with people I barely knew. I've worked as a nanny for 3 years now and I love what I do. It started when I was in college studying early childhood education. I needed a flexible job that would let me gain experience with kids while keeping up with my classes. The family I work for found me through a nanny agency, and they've been amazing. They respect my time, pay me fairly, and understand that being a nanny is a real profession, not just playing with kids all day like some people think. The job has its challenges: long days, dealing with tantrums, and sometimes working late when the parents get stuck in traffic or have work emergencies. But the family I work for always compensates me extra for overtime, and they're genuinely appreciative of what I do. They've taught me that professional childcare deserves professional respect. Working in their household, I interact with their other staff members regularly. There's a housekeeper who comes twice a week, a landscaper, and a cook who works Monday through Friday. The cook and I have always been cordial. We chat about our weekends, share the occasional joke, and she sometimes offers me leftover food from whatever she's prepared for the family. I wouldn't call us close friends, but we're friendly co-workers who respect each other's workspace. That's why what happened this morning caught me completely off guard. I was in the playroom with the kids, helping them build a fort out of couch cushions, when the cook walked in with her usual casual demeanor. She had this expectant look on her face, like she was about to ask me to pass the salt, or something equally simple. She told me she'd noticed I was very good with kids and asked if I could watch her twins next Saturday night. She mentioned it was both our day off, so she assumed I'd be free. She said it was just overnight, but there was no please in her request, no polite asking, just a straight-up assumption that I'd be her free babysitter. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her, thinking I must have misheard. I asked her where she lived, and she told me about 20 minutes from here. When I asked about gas money or payment, she actually looked surprised, like the thought of paying me hadn't even crossed her mind. She explained that they were tight on money right now, but assured me it would be super chill because the kids go to bed by 9 p.m. She suggested I could just crash on their couch. She wanted me to drive 20 minutes to her house, watch her kids overnight for free, and sleep on her couch like I was doing her some casual favor. I politely told her I couldn't do an unpaid overnight job. That's when her whole attitude shifted. Her face scrunched up like I just told her I kick puppies for fun. She said she was surprised because she thought I liked kids, and it happened to be my day off too. Then she dropped the real bomb. She told me she'd already told her kids that someone fun was coming. Not only did she expect free labor, but she'd already promised her children that I was coming without even asking me first. I told her that yes, I liked kids, but that didn't mean I was a free on-demand sleepover nanny for co-workers. I asked her how she could tell her kids I was coming before even asking me. I turned around and walked away before she could respond, my hands actually shaking from anger. The kids I was supposed to be watching looked confused by the tension, so I quickly redirected them back to their fort building. But the cook wasn't done. She followed me into the kitchen 20 minutes later while I was preparing the kids' snacks. She told me she didn't understand why I was being so difficult about this. She said it was just one night, and I was already great with kids. I explained that being good with kids was literally my job, a job I get paid for. I told her that just because I'm skilled at something doesn't mean I should do it for free. She then claimed we were friends and that friends help each other out. I corrected her, saying we were co-workers, not friends. I added that even friends don't assume their friends will work for free. She crossed her arms and got that look people get when they're about to say something entitled. She told me fine, but not to expect her to be friendly anymore. She said she thought I was different, but I was just selfish like everyone else. That's when I realized she was one of those people who thinks being nice to someone means they owe you whatever you want. I decided to stop being polite. I told her she was right. I was selfish. Selfish enough to expect payment for my professional services. Selfish enough to want my days off to actually be days off. And selfish enough to think that promising your kids something before asking is manipulative and unfair to them. She said she couldn't believe I was making such a big deal out of this. I pointed out that she literally tried to guilt me by saying she already told her kids. She assumed I'd work for free, drive to her house, and sleep on her couch. Then she called me selfish when I said no. I asked her who was really making a big deal here. She opened her mouth to argue, but the mother of the family I work for walked into the kitchen at that exact moment. She asked if everything was okay because she could hear raised voices from the other room. The cook's face went pale. She mumbled something about needing to get back to work and practically ran out of the kitchen. The mother asked what that was about, so I explained the whole situation. Her reaction was exactly what I needed to hear. She told me that the cook's behavior was completely inappropriate. She said I was a professional nanny, not free childcare for the staff. She promised to have a conversation with the cook about workplace boundaries. Later that afternoon, I overheard the mother talking to the cook in very firm tones about respecting other employees and not using work relationships for personal favors. The cook avoided eye contact with me for the rest of the day. The next morning, she came up to me with a very different attitude. She apologized for yesterday and said she realized she was out of line. I told her I appreciated that. Then she asked if I might know any babysitters who might be available for Saturday night. She quickly added that she could pay them, of course. I told her I'd think about it and let her know I never did give her any referrals. Something about the way she handled the whole situation made me think she'd probably try the same guilt tactics on whoever I recommended. Plus, I realized that her apology was more about not wanting to get in trouble with our boss than actually understanding why her behavior was wrong. Some people think that because you enjoy your work, you should be willing to do it for free. But that's not how the world works, and it's definitely not how I work. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.